Okay, well, welcome again, everyone. I'm Sophia Pagalatis with the Planning and Development Department of the City of Fresno, and you have arrived at our community study session on the Here to Stay report. It was our fourth session. It's actually our third because we rescheduled the second one, but that'll all become clear when you look at our calendar. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen and get started on logistics. So let's see. Does everyone see our screen?
I can see your screen.
Great. So tonight we'll be discussing two topic areas within the Here to Stay report: direct services and alternatives to eviction, and dignified housing and legacy considerations. But first, let's have Marisela walk us through logistics for the evening.
Thanks, Sophia. My name is Marisela Martinez. I'm a planner in the Long Range Planning Division, and tonight I'll be your Zoom host. I did want to let everybody know that translation services are available this evening, and once I go ahead and activate that function, all participants should join a language channel in order to listen to and communicate with all participants. So how you're going to go ahead and go about doing that is you're going to go ahead and select the interpretation globe that will appear in just a couple of minutes at the bottom of your screen. And then you'll go ahead and select your preferred language. The options that will appear on your screen this evening are English, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi. And if we could please have our Spanish interpreter unmute themselves to provide those same instructions.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos. Estamos una vez más aquí reunidos y queremos darles unas cuantas instrucciones de cómo accesar los servicios de interpretación a español. En la parte inferior de su pantalla usted verá un globo. Una vez que usted vea este globito, usted va a seleccionar el globo y seleccionar su idioma de preferencia. En este caso va a ser el idioma español. Muy pronto estará siendo activado y podrán escucharme en el canal de español. Gracias.
Thank you. And if we could please have our Hmong interpreter please unmute themselves and provide those same instructions.
Nhà trong thế trong sẽ tại đó này tôi cũng lúc thông sĩ thả here to stay không kể tôi bé sinh sẽ được năm bé đó các bé khi nó ta bé yo khi cho không xài lúc đó này bé thấy cái này một công ý không xài lúc nó bé mà luôn kỳ lúc này lúc không thế lúc khi tôi sẽ được cái này sẽ tao lúc không muốn nhớ tôi lại đó ở lúc đấy chơi học cả một xài lúc không chỉ có yon họ lúc không xài cho có nhau tôi lúc thông sĩ thả nó cái cái gì dùng đó có lúc sẽ tao thằng nhớ tôi lại đó ở bé lúc vào vào nhớ lúc xài thì muốn nhớ tôi lúc
Thank you. And finally, if we could please have our Punjabi interpreter unmute themselves and also provide those instructions.
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਕੁਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ 'ਚ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਹੈਗੀ ਇਹ ਚੌਥੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਉਹ ਹੋਊਗੀ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਗਲੋਬ ਥੱਲੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਸਿਲੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਜਾਂ ਸਪੈਨਿਸ਼ ਹਮੋਂਗ ਜਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਉਹ ਚੁਣੋ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਕੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚੁਣ ਲਓਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚੁਣੋਗੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸੁਣਾਈ ਦੇਈ ਜਾਊਗੀ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਇਹਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨੀ ਅੱਜ ਕਾਫੀ ਇਹਨੀ ਸਲਾਈਡਾਂ ਸਟੂਡਾਂ ਦਿਖਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰੂੰ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੀ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਉੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੀ ਜਾਊਂਗੀ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ
Thank you. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and activate that function. So a little message should have just popped up at the bottom of your screen. So again, you'll go ahead and select that interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen and then choose your preferred language. So we'll give folks just a couple of seconds to find that button. If you're not seeing it right away, you may want to try to go ahead and hit those three little dots and then hit the globe from there. Alrighty. And I did also want to let everybody know that tonight's meeting is being recorded and publicly broadcasted to the CMAC government channel, as well as the City of Fresno's Facebook page and YouTube channel. It will be posted to the Transform Fresno website as well as the City of Fresno Housing Element website, and participation in this meeting will be considered consent to be recorded. And if you're joining us for the first time and you're using Zoom and you're unfamiliar with all the buttons that you see on your screen, during the public comment period, you'll go ahead and use the raise hand button or press *9 on your phone if you're dialing in, so that you can go ahead and let us know that you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back to Sophia for some updates on our schedule.
Yes, it's looking kind of crazy here. Thank you, Maricela. So we are at our August 19th session, which we thought was scheduled as the 4th session. But because we had some technical difficulties with our July 29th session, that one has been rescheduled to August 26th. So next week, same place, same time, we will be discussing the topics that were originally scheduled for July 29th. I also wanted you to know who is in the room on the part of the city. Your facilitators tonight in breakout sessions will be planners from the Planning and Development Department. And if you would all just give a wave, and you'll get to know them in the breakout sessions. We also have some other city staff here with us tonight, Courtney Espinoza from the Transform Fresno program, and possibly others. And we have some members of our anti-displacement task force with us tonight. Task force members want to give a wave? Great. So that's, okay, there we go. I see Eric is here, and I saw Catherine Forbes as well. So with that, Drew, would you like to do a poll for us to learn who's here in the room with us this evening?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. We want to see who's on the call tonight. So I just launched a poll to ask what best describes you. You should be able to vote on that. Are you a resident, a member of a public agency, a member of a nonprofit agency, a community advocate, a developer, a business owner, a landlord, a tenant, or other? Last time we had a pretty good split. It seems like we've had a pretty well-balanced group of people for most of our meetings, which is very good to see. I'm going to leave it open for a little bit to make sure we can get as many votes as possible. We appreciate everybody participating. All right, I'm going to close it in just a couple seconds. And there we go. All right. Can everybody see the results? Awesome. So it looks like we got a split between our majority of community advocates, and close behind we have residents and some members of nonprofit agencies, and we still have some landlords as well. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. So our agenda for tonight is same format as we've been using in the prior sessions. Do a little background, make sure you all know how to comment on the Here to Stay report, take any questions, and then our policy topics for tonight are those that you see here. Then we will break in, once we review these policy topics just briefly, I'll go through them, and then we'll break into our breakout sessions where you can discuss them in more detail. And then don't go away, because the best part is the report back to the group where we hear highlights from your conversations. We will close hopefully promptly by 7:30. I think last meeting went over a tad, but we'll try to stick to our schedule. And the ground rules. Drew, would you go over those, please?
Absolutely. So we're here tonight to study the report and have conversations. So in order to do that, we have some ground rules to make it to ensure that we have a good, lively conversation and it's respectful. So we want to respect the meeting and each other. One of the best ways we could do that is make sure we listen. Also, want to make sure everyone can participate and no one dominates. A good way to do that is making sure we're taking turns while we're talking. We also want to make sure we're staying on topic. We're here to discuss the Here to Stay report in specific sections. And we want to make sure we seek unity and not separation, which means we can disagree and we can do that without being disagreeable. If we follow these, we should have continuously good conversations.
Thank you, Drew. So the purpose of the meeting is to increase the understanding of the policy ideas in the Here to Stay report, identify the need for more information, and of course, make sure that everyone knows how to comment on the report. And so I'll give a little background. I know some of you have heard this a couple times already, but if there are any newcomers on this session, I always like to make sure we have the same context. And so how did we get here talking about anti-displacement and displacement prevention? Well, I would say that our city's planning framework really lays this out for us. Several plans have been adopted in the last few years: our Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan, our Housing Element, and our Southwest Fresno Specific Plan that call for investments in older, underinvested areas of the city. And it is possible that when investments are made, if care is not taken in how that is done, existing residents can get priced out of the neighborhood as property values increase, and not just residents, but merchants as well. And so these three plans identified this phenomena and recommended that an anti-displacement strategy be developed. And in that strategy, the goal is to study displacement, figure out where it's happening and why it's happening, and then adopt policies and programs to prevent and reduce displacement. So that is sort of the groundwork of why we are here. And many of you know that as part of that strategy, an anti-displacement task force was created in 2018. And also, I should mention that the Transform Fresno program, which is investing in Southwest Fresno, Chinatown, and downtown, also has a displacement avoidance plan. And that needs input from this process. So that is what this is all about. The Here to Stay report was commissioned by the city to study displacement and to recommend policies and programs to reduce or prevent it. And the Thrivance Group was the consultant group hired to do the work. They spent a lot of time and hours in Southwest Fresno doing door-to-door interviews, phone calls, sending out flyers, and they created this report. It contains 46 different policy ideas organized by 7 different overall topics. And we've been reviewing those at these meetings and talking about them. So we really want you, when you feel informed enough, to provide your comments on the Here to Stay report. And you can find both the report in Spanish, English, and Hmong on the Transform Fresno website, along with a comment card and a survey. And so we'd really like to have your input. You can also send us an email at transformfresno@fresno.gov. And we'd like to hear from you by September 3rd of this year. That's when our comment period ends. This is just a screenshot of the survey that's online. And if you don't like doing things online, we do have hard copies of the reports and the comment cards and surveys at these locations. I'll leave that there for a minute in case anyone wants to take a screenshot. and wanted to let you know the timeline and the process for considering the policy ideas in the Here to Stay report. Right now, we're in the public comment period. The comments and surveys and emails that we receive will all be compiled and organized and made available to the public and the Anti-Displacement Task Force, who will consider them and the report at a meeting in probably late September. And then they will make a recommendation on the report. They will recommend which policies should be top priority for the City Council to consider implementing. Their recommendation will go to the Planning Commission and the City Council. And the City Council is the body that has the final authority to decide which policies they want to pursue. And we expect to get this in front of them this fall sometime. They will, I anticipate that they will direct staff to pursue certain policies. And there may be some policies that can be implemented immediately, and there may be some that require further development. As they are in the Here to Stay report, they're fairly high level. There's not a lot of detail. So probably they would need to be further refined before they would be implemented. So we just have a policy development period here from 2021 to 2023 and policy adoption period from 2022 to 2024. But that's certainly worst case. I think that there could be some policies that could be adopted, you know, in the earlier part of those phases. So before we jump in, let me actually go back. This is a good place to pause for questions about process or how to access the documents. Anybody have any questions about that? And Maricela, I'll rely on you or Drew if you see folks with questions.
Yep, I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Okay. Then we will just move along into our subject matter. So tonight we have two topics that we're going to discuss, and the first is direct services and alternatives to eviction, which is certainly a relevant topic right now. We have 4 main policies that will be discussed and then some additional recommendations. So hold on just one moment. I'm having there we go. Okay. It's having a screen issue here where I couldn't see everything. So the first program or policy is called the Here to Stay Homeowner and Renter Assistance Program, with the goal of helping low-income households remain housed through various crises that may occur. This program would be for both homeowners and renters, as it says. For the homeowners, the program may look like a first-time home buyer program that could provide down payment and closing costs. It could provide renovation loans and energy upgrade loans for existing homeowners, or potentially grants. And then for renters, it could provide short-term assistance with rent. The city has recently established an emergency rental assistance program, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. I also did want to let you know that the city is planning to establish a down payment assistance program with some funds that are expected from the state, but it does not have one at this time. So as far as the emergency rental assistance program, I usually kind of give this plug toward the end of the meeting, but I thought this would be a good place to mention it. The city has one. It can provide funds to help pay rent during this time of COVID and job loss and housing challenges. So I wanted to make sure you saw the phone number and the email. The next program is an eviction right to counsel program. The goal is to reduce displacement by providing legal counsel to tenants facing eviction. It recommends starting a pilot program immediately. And I will say that the city has recently established an eviction protection program for unlawful eviction. So a tenant that's being evicted can reach out to our program. Our program staff will evaluate whether or not the eviction is lawful or not. If it is an unlawful eviction, then that tenant will be offered legal assistance to navigate that. Maricela, do we have a question? No. Okay.
Nope, we just do have some folks still joining us.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad they're joining in. If you're just joining, we just started to go through the policy topics and you haven't missed the breakout sessions yet, so that's great. So the next program is the rental registration program with the goal of maintaining habitability of our rental housing stock. Under this program, rental property owners would register with the city and pay a small annual fee, which would fund inspections. The city would inspect properties every 3 to 5 years. Code violations would be identified and remedied. And if this sounds familiar, it should. The city established a rental inspection program in 2018. Thrivance is recommending that program be expanded. So if you have any experience with that program, we would love to hear about it in the breakout sessions. Then the additional recommendations are those displayed on the screen. Just a note, when policy ideas are presented under the additional recommendations, they are not perhaps recommended as strongly as the primary recommendations. So I would say with these in your breakout sessions, if you get to them, that's great, but you should prioritize the main policy recommendations. So nonetheless, there are some great ideas in these additional recommendations. Here is a displacement burden access designation, which suggests the city of Fresno should establish a region-specific definition for displacement burden or risk of displacement, and all social and direct services being provided should be required to add that as an alternative eligibility criteria. The next idea is an expanded project room key. The city does have project room key programs, which are housing individuals experiencing homelessness. This program recommends having that program evaluated by a housing justice organization and making recommendations for long-term vision of the program. The next suggestion is an incentivized eviction mediation program, where an eviction diversion program would be established and led by a coalition of community-based organizations and offered as an alternative to eviction on new leases. So landlords could opt in to this program, which would offer mediation as an alternative to eviction. It's probably a more collaborative process and less costly for both parties. So that could be a win-win. And then there was a suggestion on rapid rehousing dispatch, in which the city would establish a division dedicated to responding to housing emergencies and would use the resources to house people who would otherwise be ineligible for existing systems and services. So those are those programs which were under the eviction avoidance recommendation. This next group of policies is called dignified housing and legacy considerations.
Sophia, before we dive into the next section, we do have a question in the chat. So if you want to go back one slide.
Absolutely.
An attendee, Lola, asked 5 years, when does the clock start? Because 5 years is a small window of time. And I believe that comment came in during the second additional recommendation of expanded project room key. Lola, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself so that we can go ahead and clarify which additional recommendation you were asking about. So you should be able to unmute yourself now. Here, let me go ahead and try that again. And if not, feel free to also type it in the chat if you're having issues with your audio.
Yes, I could use hearing the question. So Lola, I look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't really, I was watching on YouTube. So I was trying to get both places, but yeah, I am concerned that a 5-year window of time for eminent domain is a very small window of time.
Oh, are you referring to the eminent domain moratorium?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So that was a policy idea that was discussed at our last meeting, and that's okay. And I think that if we can make a note of that and add your comment to the to our comments on that particular topic. We discussed that it was a moratorium on eminent domain that would be used for the purpose of economic development. So
yeah, I was in the last meeting, but there was
okay.
there was no time period. We talked about a moratorium, but we didn't talk about a time period.
Okay.
So I mean, would like that to be on the record that 5 years is like today and tomorrow to me,
Okay.
So I think that's a small window of time. That's all. Thank you for letting me speak.
Sure. Thanks for the feedback. I'm just making a note here. Okay. Any other questions, Maricela?
Let's see. There's one more in the chat from Robert. How can the city improve the emergency rental assistance outreach? Only 6 million out of 35 million has been allocated.
I would love to know your ideas on that. Where are we missing, the outreach? So that would be something great to talk about in the breakout sessions.
Alrighty, and I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any hands up either if we want to move into the second set of policy recommendations.
Sounds good. So here they are. These are, again, as I mentioned, dignified housing and legacy considerations. And legacy considerations are considerations for possibly making atonement for past practices of redlining and restrictive covenants. So we have 3 main policies and then several additional recommendations. And I will jump right into those. So the first one is a public service lease incentive with the goal of providing housing stability to people who provide social and community services. And the suggestion is to provide longer lease terms, 2 to 3 years, for community organizers, social service providers, volunteers, advocates, and civil service employees. So that's kind of a creative idea. The next one is an independent use housing coordination function with the goal of addressing specific housing needs of youth. Apparently when Thrivance was doing its social climate analysis and interviews for their report, they did find that youth had special needs when it came to housing, such as there were issues with domestic violence and also issues with having maybe not the long track record with a job that landlords would want to see, and yet they are responsible enough to hold down a job and rent an apartment. So the idea here is that the city would create an organization that provides added support to youth to address issues such as domestic violence, income verification, and attending school and working. And it would do that through a verification process. One way to sort of vouch for the youth would be through a verification process through a social service agency that the youth is able to pay rent, maintain a job, attend school, etc. So it's just exploring ways of giving youth that added support that they need for getting started in being a tenant or even a homeowner. The next policy is a right to return home. And the goal here is to provide opportunities for displaced tenants and homeowners or their descendants to move back into the communities that they were forced to leave. And these have been implemented in other places in the United States. Notably, Portland, Oregon has a right to return policy. What these typically do is create an affordable housing preference policy. So in an area that perhaps is being developed with new investment and new housing, perhaps rental housing, perhaps some ownership housing, persons who can show that they were displaced or that their family before them were displaced from that neighborhood would get preference to if they were qualified for housing in the area, new housing in the area. This could apply to commercial and residential uses. The Thrivance report proposes that a policy like this be implemented in Southwest Fresno, and it is being proposed as atonement for past practices of redlining, racism, and restrictive covenants. There are several additional recommendations in this section, from tenant buyout regulations, an automatic anti-displacement zone that would offer some kind of protections around an area that had new investment in a vulnerable area. There's also a proposal for dignified tiny house villages and scattered site housing, a moratorium on encampment sweeps, kinship housing permissions, and those involve relaxing some of the qualifications for receiving some kind of a social service benefit and being able to live with someone who has a regular income. Often seniors, for example, may be disqualified from benefits because they opt to live with a family member that has, an income that's over the eligible income. And finally, informed livability is about allowing maybe, again, relaxed standards for what consists of a housing unit in terms of being able to keep a homeless person off of the street and sheltered in some way. So those are the additional recommendations. I recommend that you prioritize the primary ones, but if you get to these, you certainly can discuss them, perhaps deciding in your group which ones you would like to discuss. And so this is where we are getting to the breakout sessions. And the goal of those is to increase understanding of the policy ideas by listening and learning from each other, to identify where more information is needed, to suggest ideas related to the policies. And just a reminder that the role of your facilitators is to keep the conversation going, but they are not necessarily subject matter experts. So just want you to know that. And the questions that we have as prompts to get you started are these. And some of you have probably heard these before because you've been here before. So, so you'll have 45 minutes. We're right on time. You'll be in your breakout sessions until 7 o'clock, and then that's when we'd like to pull you back into the main meeting. And we'd like you to identify a speaker out of your group that can report back the highlights of your discussions, areas of agreement and disagreement, and questions. So with that, Maricela, do we have any other logistics that we need to talk about before breaking into our sessions?
I don't believe so. We're going to go ahead and have our Spanish interpreter go ahead and translate a comment that we got in the chat for everybody prior to going into our breakout sessions. Once I have everyone go into breakout sessions, we'll go ahead and discuss the policy recommendations a little more in depth. But first, Maria, if you could please go ahead and read that item in the chat out to the group.
I can help out, Maricela. She is probably stuck in the interpretation mode, but how is the city supporting small business owners so that they are not displaced is the question in Spanish.
Thank you, Reina.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure how to best respond. If I respond in this forum, will the answer be translated to the asker? I presume it will be.
That would be correct. Simultaneous interpretation is still on.
Okay, great. So this report, the Here to Stay report, definitely is, although a lot of the discussion is about residential displacement, it does include small business concerns and trying to avoid small business displacement. And there are some policies that we have reviewed along the way in the report that speak to that. Currently, the city's Economic Development Department has resources to work with small business owners who have been impacted by COVID to help get them resources. And we could probably put a phone number in the chat for that. If you maybe give us a few minutes when you come back from the breakout sessions, we'll have a contact for you. How about that?
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you again to Reina for going and translating that comment. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask our Spanish speakers to raise their virtual hands so that I can place you into the Spanish designated language room. So again, you'll go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, you'll go ahead and select *9 if you're dialing in. So I see some hands going up. We'll go ahead and assign you to a room. Otherwise, you can also type in the chat. And if you don't necessarily see a raise hand button, there may be a button at the bottom of your screen that says reactions. It's a little smiley face. And so for the Spanish speaking room, you can hit that reactions button and then hit raise hand. Alrighty. Perfect. And now if we could please have our Hmong speakers go ahead and raise their hand. Thank you very much. And finally, our Punjabi speakers. All right. Seeing none. Alrighty, to our Hmong and Punjabi interpreters, you'll go ahead and stay in the main room in case we have anyone joining late. For everyone else, you will go ahead and be placed automatically into a breakout room. Once you're in the room, you don't need to press anything, but when you do rejoin the main room, once the breakout sessions are over, we do ask that you go ahead and rejoin your preferred language channel. So I'm going to go ahead and start that process now. It'll just take me a couple of moments to assign some folks that joined a little late. One moment. And Sophia, did you go over how long those breakout rooms were going to be? I'm not sure if I caught that.
Yes, I did. We try to give everyone 45 minutes. So at about 7 o'clock, we'd be coming back together.
Great. Perfect. Alrighty. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms. If you see any little blue banner at the top of the screen, that's a message from me letting you know how much time is remaining. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and try to pop into each room and send a quick message in your chat letting you know I'm there for any technical assistance. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up the breakout rooms.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm gonna put our digital tool in the chat. So if everybody's able to hop in and do that. If not, I'll share my screen, which will allow everybody. So that's the Jamboard. And so if you're, oh, go ahead, Brandy.
Oh, I was gonna say, how does CMAC end up being in my group again? I was hoping not to be the one recorded.
Well, we know we're gonna have your comments on the record, so. Eric, I see you just joined. I'm gonna throw that back in the chat. All right, now that we're all here, my name is Drew Wilson. I'm with the City of Fresno. Welcome. I will be your facilitator for the evening. So what I think would be good for us to do is we'll go around the digital table and have everybody introduce themselves, name and affiliation. And after that, we'll go over the tool we have here, which is the Jamboard. And I'll share my screen and we can go over to some detail how we use that. And then we'll get right into discussion. With that, Brandy, would you please go first?
Okay. What were we supposed to say?
Just your name, affiliation, or anything else you'd like to add.
Oh, okay. My name is Brandy Villegas, and I work in a number, or just involved in a number of community, just community involvement and justice, and work a lot with those who are working with the homeless, such as We Are Not Invisible and other groups.
Thank you. All right. Courtney, would you please go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Espinoza from the City of Fresno. I oversee Transform Fresno and all of those projects and that program.
Thank you. All right. Alexandros.
Hi, Alexandros. I work for the EOC, also involved in a number of different social justice organizations in town, including DSA.
Thank you. I apologize for the mispronunciation of your name. Lisa. Lisa, are you there?
Sometimes Lisa has sound issues.
Oh,
We come back.
All right. Well, Lisa, when you're able to speak, you can just hop right in. I'm going to share the screen so we can all see that. Can everybody see the screen? Awesome. All right. So this is the tool we're going to be using to jot down all of our ideas for the evening. I've seen several of you on here before, but again, I just want to give a recap just so we know how to use it. So we have the first screen here. Oh, probably. You guys seeing this thing? There we go. So we have this screen here, which is what we're here for. If you guys are able to access, feel free to jump on in. Over here is where you can make your quotes or make your comments. We'll go here. I'm going to ask for somebody to be kind of our note taker for the evening. Put it on here. That's where you add your sticky notes. We can assign names. How these boards work is we have a quick overview of the first subject we're going to talk about. So direct services and alternative to eviction. We have all the programs listed here. And each one of those programs has its own individual slide where we can take notes and have a discussion on each of them. So we'll go through all of those. And I think we do have a general notes. And so if there's general notes or ideas, we can throw it on there. And then we have the same thing over here for dignified housing and legacy consideration. Again, we have about 40 minutes. And so last time I know it was kind of tough to get through all of them. So I want to make sure we have an opportunity to talk to all of them. The goal of the evening is to ask some general questions related to each program, which is, has anyone in the group ever experienced, has anyone in the group had experience with any of the ideas? So we'll go over each one independently, and we'd like you to share if you have.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I just got notified. I was outside with my dog really quick, trying to get her in from all this smoke. And they said that somebody called on me. Did I miss something?
Lisa, I just asked you to introduce yourself. So we're in our breakout room, and this is is where we're going to start having the discussion.
Right. Okay.
So it is a blessing in disguise. One moment. I apologize for interrupting everyone mid-thought. 1 second. Alrighty, I'm going to open the rooms back up. Thank you for your patience.
All right, welcome back, everybody.
Sorry about that. You know, dog's constitutional and all.
Yep, I get it. I got a little tiny terrier mix. She's almost 14 years old. I now live on her schedule. I used to get mad when she'd wake me up at, what she still does, at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning or 6 in the morning. And I no longer get mad because she runs the roost, which is fine.
Well, luckily mine sleeps till almost noon. So anyway, nice. Everybody knows Lisa Flores, dog owner.
Welcome. All right, so I'm going over, I have our screens up, and again, we want to go through each one of the programs and ask the questions. Has anybody in the group had experience with any of the ideas? If you have, please share them. Give us your initial thoughts on the ideas that were presented, and then if you have any questions about the ideas, we want to try to jot those down. And something a little bit new is how could the ideas be improved if possible? So talking about some of maybe the pros and cons of each one of them. And again, we have now just under 40 minutes. So we have 37 minutes. We want to get through each one. So I want to make sure we have a good amount of time to talk. So I'll try to draw some questions out or and get people to talk. And then I'll make some suggested time or push us along based off of time. Is everybody ready to go? All right. Can I get somebody to volunteer to be the report back to the full group when we're done?
Drew, I'd like to volunteer to be the scribe.
Awesome. Yes, that's the hardest job to fill sometimes. Thank you. Lisa, Alexandros, or Brandy, would either of you like to be the report back?
No, I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually cooking dinner and like serving and doing stuff. So I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to do that.
Okay.
Yes, it's me. But if anyone wanted to jump in if I miss anything, someone suggested that having 2 people is helpful. So if I miss anything, if one of you guys could jump in, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'll try to take really good notes.
Yep. Now I just want to know what Alexandros is cooking for dinner. All right, so we're gonna hop right in. Here to Stay homeowner and renter assistance programs. Has anybody in the group had experience with any of these ideas or this idea?
Yeah, I actually suggested it to the city council at the very start of the pandemic with a bunch of other remedies to, you know, assist the community as we went into the as we entered into the pandemic, actually, in my 3 minutes. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a pro. You think it should happen?
Oh yeah, because it's the best way to stabilize housing in Fresno. It's the only way to stabilize housing and lessen the number of people that are going to end up homeless.
Do we have any other thoughts on this?
I'll jump in. And I would appreciate hearing from Lisa why she supported that. That was good. But I want to point out in this report about the idea of also implementing a housing equity system to track landlords and census blocks where there's excessive amount of people seeking aid through this. It said they're having a department dedicated to displacement to investigate those things. And I think that having an opportunity to keep track and evaluate what's going on, to make sure that I think that's another way that, this won't fall, people won't fall through the cracks. So I think that it's very important to have a tracking system to go along with it.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a way to improve. I appreciate that. So you guys are already skilled and ahead of the game. Lisa, would you like to, Brandy, you asked, you would want to know what Lisa's reason for moving it forward was. Is that what you asked?
Oh, I think she addressed it.
Okay.
Unless she had anything else she wanted to add to it, because I'd like to hear.
Lisa, is there anything? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually kind of saw the pandemic move forward. And I actually, it goes back to me dating a Republican in college who was doing his master's in history and wrote a very good paper on the 1918 pandemic in Fresno County. And with my history background and me being a retired planner, one of the things I thought is the first thing you need to do in stabilizing your community in a time of utmost crisis, you have to make sure your supply chains and people get fed. You have to look at possible subsidies for employment, and you have to really focus on medical, and you have to make sure they have a place to live. Because if a person has a place to live, then the other things come into play. But if you upset housing and people get displaced in the middle of a pandemic, it just makes it worse. And then you have a bigger pandemic spread. So I was thinking long game with knowing, because, I dated him for a while, so I got to hear a lot about his paper. So that's why I brought it forward as a community member with the base knowledge. And also too, it's like, how do you overthrow a government? You start to undermine the chain and the basic things of society, which is housing, food, and employment.
Thank you for the context, Lisa. Do we have any other thoughts on this? Any questions or
on the direct services and alternatives to eviction?
So we're talking specifically about we're talking about the Here to Stay homeowner and renter assistance programs.
We're going by each point, Alex. So right now we're on, this is a point that he just shared that we're on. If you looked on the thing, on the.
I see the shared screen. It says Here to Stay homeowners and rentals. Okay. Ooh. No, I'm familiar with the concept. I mean, I know there's rent control. I don't know if Fresno has rent control or if that's something that we can that can be affected here. Gosh, when I think about just eviction, I don't know. I'd also say, I mean, like people need aid. People need aid to stay. I mean, it should be like a city right to have some kind of safe, secure shelter in some way, shape, or form. And I don't have any other. As far as like, I don't know too many specifics about these programs.
Okay, not a problem. Yeah, it's a good comment. We appreciate it. We'll mark it down. And if we don't have any more, then I suggest we move on to the next one. Does that work for everybody? All right. Next one is the Here to Stay rental deposit program. Does anybody have experience with this?
Nope.
Yeah. I don't, but I know, well, I do.
That doesn't currently exist.
What's that?
It does not exist.
Does this actually currently exist okay, so this is what.
These are recommendations that they're putting forth to present to the city that they feel would help address displacement. So these are all
Thanks, Brandy,
recommendations.
but he's the facility.
Okay.
No, Brandy did a great job. That's
so okay, great.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I just wanted to say hello. I'm visiting
Well,
for
I
a
think
short
it's a
while.
very good idea. I think that it's a very vital program to actually have a rental when if we come out of this pandemic, if evictions are lifted, because the original were going to be 2,000 additional homeless on the streets. If the eviction moratorium is gone, and I'm just wondering, since it's had to be extended, if that projected number has grown. So this is actually going to be a very, very vital housing in Fresno, because it'll give people who have no money, the opportunity to rebuild. And that's what people need, is the compassion and the opportunity to rebuild, their life after just a hell of a year and a half. I see it as a positive. It gives, and I also really do believe in rent control. And I did actually bring that up over a year ago to the city council as well.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in with
I had trouble following Lisa because her audio was kind of cutting out. Is there a quick note that you want me to put on this Jamboard regarding your comment, Lisa? Specifically about the rental deposit program?
Yes, it'll help stabilize. It'll stabilize the rental market here in Fresno, as well as hopefully lessen the number of people that will become homeless, the new homeless. The new homeless will be families.
Thank you.
It should expand and extend the eviction moratorium for at least another 6 months through Christmas. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Brandy, you were going to say something?
Oh, yes. I know that one of the big challenges, and she mentioned about new homeless. I think that, so not personally, but I know that one of the biggest challenges I've seen with a lot of people is, not just finding housing, but having that deposit. I think that having it, having the security of not worrying about, once you do put a deposit that you might lose it for untrackable reasons. We need to protect against those who were that might come up with reasons to take from the deposit. And I appreciate the fact that they would have to show the city what the expenses are that they're removing, so that we have more transparency with landlords and ensure that if there are any expenses that they are in line with with what is laid out in what could be taken out of the deposit, so that those who might be unfairly might have their deposit unfairly taken for them are not put in a situation of also having to come up with new deposit money. But also, it does protect it also ensures that the landlords do get that money if there's needs for that. So
thank you, Brandy. Alex, would you like to add anything?
Nope.
All right. If we have no more thoughts or opinions, we could go on to the next one. Does that work? All right, I'm moving to the next one. I think I'm slightly out of order because I moved the slides up top when I was showing you. So next one is a eviction right to counsel. Has anybody had any experience with this idea or any thoughts on this? Ways you can improve it? Potential pros and cons? Alex, let's start with you this time.
Absolutely. We know that when it comes to counsel in kind of litigation between renters and property owners, and property owners are overwhelmingly have like the law and counsel behind them. So I mean, the right to counsel is crucial to the dignity and justice of renters. I know that there's been, City, I think Councilman Chavez was trying to water it down, but he was trying to do some kind of like some hub. But no, but the idea is that legal counsel is that renters who are facing eviction should have legal counsel. If the property owners who have the wealth can have legal counsel, then the renters should also have legal counsel, and that's the idea, right? Is to prevent a lot of this illegal activity that a lot of the property owners are doing.
Thank you, Alex. Brandy or Lisa, do you have anything to add? Thoughts, opinions? Have you experienced this before?
Again, from people I've worked with, there has been issues, and I know that a lot of our community has mentioned about that. We've had experienced someone who was in the process of being wrongfully evicted and was able to access counsel, but and through that they were able to avoid eviction. So I definitely see that the need for this. I also am aware. I also experienced someone who contacted me because they were going to be evicted, and it was also unlawful because it was during a time where there was a moratorium on evictions during COVID, and they did not know about their own rights. So with that, I think that in addition to renters' right of counsel, that we also need to make sure that it's well known in the community that this option exists.
Thank you. It sounds like you earned support and have some experience. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm actually going to piggyback on Brandy. What the city does is they have these programs, but they are really bad at really marketing them well to let the general public know that these are out there. You may see a billboard, you may see an email, they have the marketing versus, really blasting it out there. What I would like to see on the eviction right to counsel is I do not want to, send somebody to go through this process and have a staff person that isn't a paralegal or an attorney deal with this. Or, I want to see a paralegal or an attorney dealing with this versus like a clerical person. who can make value judgments, because part of the problem I also see possibly happening here is if a person is not culturally sensitive and culturally competent, you may have some projected biases on a person in regards to why they're being evicted. So they may be pigeonholed. And so the city is going to have to overcome that, because I know when dealing with certain aspects of the city, you know, I get a lot of value judgments. When people first meet me, they don't think I'm college educated. They don't think I have the life experience. They don't think, you know, I have my, you know, credentials in order. And once they realize I do, it's a whole different game. And I would hate to see someone go through this process and, you know, have and come across somebody who is not culturally competent and sensitive and make those value judgments and basically weed them out. And then next thing you know, they're on a tent on the sidewalk. So cultural competency plays a really big thing with me in this part, as well as having the right staffing. Because, you know, when I know they had talked about it at city council, you know, had been talking about, you know, who's it going to be? Is it going to be like a secretary, a clerical person advising people? And, you know, you have to worry about confidentiality and about financial information, because Fresno, even though it's a big city, it's still a small little town. Everybody knows everybody.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, that's the eviction protection program, which doesn't provide you with the potential to get a city appointed attorney or legal services to assist in a process at no charge. All right, if we have no more comments or questions on that, would you guys like to move on to the next one? All right, I'm hopping on to the next one then. I'll take the silence as a yes. All right,
Drew,
rental registration.
Add something?
Yep. Yeah.
So as you see the notes popping up on your screen for all the participants, if I'm not capturing it right, please let me know and I will rewrite it. I'm trying to capture everything that we're saying, but summarize it as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Right, rental registration program. Anybody have an experience? We have something existing within the city of Fresno, and the report suggests to do a couple tweaks to it. We have any thoughts or opinions on this? Experience, pros and cons? Brandy, how about you?
I think going back to, I mean, definitely pro. I think that there is a concern about, my concern is always with those who not only would be displaced because as an excuse, and I have seen that before, but also those who may not. I appreciate that there is the opportunity for tenants to be able to voice their concerns when there's inspections that need to be made because of the fear. And this goes along with the right of council that if they start voicing concerns and asking for changes, then that might be, then landlords may use that to might respond by trying to get them out rather than making the changes. So having being able to increase, make sure that that they can stay on top of that seems like it would prevent people being pushed out, but also ensure that the needs get met sooner.
Thank you. Alex, any thoughts? Well, he may be serving dinner right now. Lisa.
No, I'm not familiar with it, but no.
Okay. Thank you.
I think a rental registration program actually would be really good, because I know that working in the LGBT community, the transgender community has sometimes a very difficult time finding housing that isn't discriminatory in town, even though they project that they're not. there's just those subtle cultural nuances that says, yeah, they are. So, you know, if this provides a mechanism that will, all right, Tasha. Tasha also likes this. She wants to know about dog houses. But you know, it's a good way to track and see if there's any sort of problematic about renovations. What? Okay. Is this about renovations?
No, this one's rental registration, but also it does include renovations. So
yeah. Yeah, but you know, I just look at the whole thing of, you know, how it impacts those communities. Thank you. I gotta go take care of my dog. Sorry.
No problem. All right. With that, we're going to move on to the next one. I'm going to recommend with time, we have 15 minutes and we have these 4 here. And then we have 3 more in the other one, which would give us enough time for about 3 to 5 minutes for each of them. So do we have anyone in particular? Maybe just we have all 4 of these up: displacement burden access designation, expanded project room key, rapid rehousing dispatch, and incentivized eviction mediation. Is there any one in particular that stands out? Somebody would like to make a comment or suggestion about it?
I'll go ahead and start. With Project Room Key, I appreciate that it mentions the housing justice. One of the things that we are seeing with Project Room Key is that there are concerns that the current resident people who are in there have, and things that they're being brought up that, and there's no, there's very little avenue for them to address concerns and possible being moved out of those areas if they address concerns such as from a number of standpoints. So I think that we do need to have a outside entity that is evaluating Project Room Key, because we've had activists bringing up concerns and telling the city that they need to provide a way for the people in there to be able to voice their concerns to a third party or to someone who is not someone outside there, so that their needs can be addressed, and have an entity, a housing justice thing that is not beholden to the grant recipients, to FMCOC, to the city, that would ensure that those who are living there are priority, because we do have other avenues of people being able to voice their concerns, but there is very little on there. And also having housing justice organization be able to evaluate may identify other needs that need to be made. So would love to see things expanded as far as providing more spaces, but also want to ensure that those that are being provided are meeting the requirements. And this is one that we have a lot of direct, been working with clients and people who are there, and been hearing from people for quite a while. So definitely would like to support the idea of the evaluation and ensuring that this expands in a way that is meeting the needs of everyone there, and that any changes that need to be made based off of the recommendations of the housing justice are made, and that it would provide an avenue I would ask that with this, that there would be ongoing means for those who live there to be able to voice any concerns, just as was mentioned in the rental registration.
Thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, we have about 12 minutes, and we have a couple here, and we also have 3 more we would go over in the next one. So if we have no more comments, then I'll make a suggested avenue for the next one.
I would like to actually say something also too about Room Key.
Yep.
From what I've seen, as far as, you know, the implementation of this homeless agenda of the Dyer administration, it really needs to be retooled, because the clients in the system that are using you know, the hotels and such, they need to have a little bit more say and a little bit more interaction. And I have to agree with Brandy as far as, you know, readdressing their concerns and readdressing their issues, as well as, you know, the wraparound services. It really doesn't seem like, I know it's in its infancy still, but it really just, it's not set up to, in my mind, succeed. It's kind of set up to fail. And, you know, I think it kind of needs to be looked at and tweaked. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide and present. Oh, if you have any open notes or questions, feel free to put them there. Okay, so we have 3 programs to review and then several additional recommendations. My thought is let's start with the one that most people want to talk about, and then we'll work our way down. So is there anyone in particular, public service lease incentive, independent youth housing coordinator, or right to return home? Is there one in particular that the group would like to talk about?
The youth coordinator, I would like to know more about that, actually.
All right. Brandy, are you all right with starting there?
Sure.
Okay. So we'll start with the youth, and then what's the second on that tier then? All right, we'll figure it out when we get.
Yeah, they're all good. I mean, probably, I suppose right to return home. Definitely have things to say on public services, so we'll just be quick.
Okay, all right. Let's try to be quick. So independent youth housing coordinator. So Lisa already commented, you just like to learn more, correct?
Well, yeah, you know, tell me what it's about and I'll give you an opinion.
So I'm not an expert at the idea is that you have a coordinator that works specifically with youth from the age of 16 to 24 who are experiencing some sort of domestic violence or other issue that needs assistance in finding housing being placed in, as well as additional services.
So I'll go ahead, and since I made notes on these before and stuff.
Awesome.
As far as connections, I know I've again worked directly, but also incidentally with those youth who have experienced homeless, had worked with in a number of capacities where they needed assistance. One was there. I mean, I know an extreme need that we have are foster youth that age out, and but we've also had people like who have had family members and they dropped support and they were basically forced out and didn't have, you know, I've heard stories about people who have been scammed out of things and, you know, struggling and end up hopeless because they weren't able to get a good start. So knowing that the need that we have a lot of youth out here who are homeless. The shelters are very small, but there's also they shouldn't be out there in the first place. And I think it needs to be in a way we need to ensure that it is works in a way that works with youth coming from different needs and backgrounds, and that they know about it. But absolutely, there are a lot of youth that don't have mentors or guardians or people who are preparing them for this, and we need to ensure that they prevent homelessness and ensure that they have success in finding and housing.
Thank you. Alex or Lisa, any additional comments, questions, thoughts? All right, I'm gonna see the chat.
Sorry about that. I had to open the back door so the spoiled dog can go outside in the smoke. Because she was, yeah, anyway. Well, I think it's a good idea. I would hope that whoever the coordinator is very sensitive to the LGBTQ community, and especially to the transgender community, because a lot of those kids get kicked out of the house and are never let back in. And if you have a housing coordinator, you definitely need to have some dedicated housing for them, because if they have to compete with everybody else on the street, I mean, if you were to, you know, if they were in a group of homeless and there were only 4 rooms available, what would the chances of them actually getting a room would be? So if you're going to talk about doing housing coordination, you need to have a dedicated slot for these, you know, these kids. You know, in my mind, that's the best thing, as well as wraparound services, because, you know, you're talking, some of these kids get thrown out as young as 14. What are you going to do?
And so if I hear you correctly, then the coordinator, you know, the selection process needs to be thought through, as well as providing a lot of the resources in advance.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually like to see the plan for this coordinator, because if it's just somebody pushing paper, it does nothing for nobody. But if it comes along with, you know, this person knows that they have a dedicated number of slots of housing, emergency housing for kids, and the wraparound services that it's going to take, then that's what you know, that would be a better use of time and energy and money. And also, you know, I'm coming from having dealt with the trans community for a number of years now, and just some of the stories I hear about people being kicked out of the house so young, and their survival, because, you know, I hear stories of, you know, they got kicked out of the house, or they got thrown out of the house, or they were asked to leave, and, you know, they ended up in the sex trade. And some of those stories are very heartbreaking. So, you know, if you're going to give somebody the hope that you have this youth housing coordinator, you know, what's in their, you know, if they're pushing paper, it means absolutely nothing. But if they can actually provide beds and wraparound services, then you have something. In other words, just don't give me a title, show me what you're going to do.
Thank you. All right, well, we have 3 minutes, so we'll right to return home. Is it okay if we move there?
Yes.
All right.
So I'll jump in, and that one, I want us to be able to get in and just say that that's absolutely, we absolutely need to make sure that happens. And my only add-on to it is ensuring that with the other recommendations that those who are wanting to return to renovated areas that would be, you know, higher income, that there would be made there would be assistance for them to be able to not only have that priority because they had previously lived there, but also assistance to ensure that they can be able to afford that and move in and address any concerns that might be deterrents to moving back.
Thank you. Alex, Lisa, any thoughts on this one?
I think it's going to be very difficult to implement when you have massive gentrification occurring in Fresno. People are coming in from way outside this region and starting to buy the houses and starting to evict people and starting to do everything that happens in gentrification because we're cheap housing in comparison to LA and San Francisco and the coast. So yeah, I agree. But I also think that if somebody goes in and renovates a place, that the person that lived there, for example, I've lived in my place for 20 years. If I got kicked out because they're a new owner, I would love to come back. But if the rent went up where I couldn't, I would have a significant problem because I would probably end up being homeless. So I would like to see, you know, a rental increase cap on this.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to get moved back shortly. Would you guys like to go to the additional policies or the public service lease incentive?
I would like to, I would definitely like to do the public service one, and I think I can address several of them really quickly.
All right.
Because, I know a lot of people who are in that field, and they had come out of situations that cause them to be able to be advocates. So so housing stability would be extremely important for those who are working to improve, especially those who are coming out of situations where they don't have, they don't necessarily have a lot of resources. So that would be extremely important. And I want to jump because I don't want to be cut off, but as far as the other two areas, the moratorium on encampments is a huge one. We've been working and fighting for there to be an end to homeless sweeps, and we've seen that it does affect housing. People lose their materials. It's really difficult for them to be able to maintain jobs if they have them. They've lost identification. It creates instability and makes it more difficult for caseworkers to work with them. And puts them in danger. So for the sake of anti-displacement, as far as, in addition to being able to encourage housing that is absolutely needed, as well as just for dignity and not losing their belongings. And for some of them, right at this point, where they're at is the safest spot until they can get into housing or shelter. So yes. And tiny houses, I absolutely would definitely support the idea, but we need to ensure that it is in throughout the community, that any of these scattered housing are in throughout the community, and that there's investment in having afford these alternative housing things be placed in other districts, especially outside of District 3, and that they're in well-resourced areas. Sorry for jumping around.
Sure. Lisa, do you have any, or Alex, any comments on any of these additional recommendations?
Yeah, I really agree with Brandy. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, as far as the tiny houses, they can't just be pulled together in a and it can be to create like some kind of ghetto. It has to be equitably and reasonably around the city. Absolutely, I think that's crucial. That's all I'll say.
Jerry Dyer did a Zoom meeting with District 1 residents that I attended because I live in District 1, and he basically said that he wanted to create a tiny home village with 700 tiny homes. And I'm thinking, no, Gary, that's not Gary, but Jerry, that is just so wrong. I have to agree with Brandy. I think that the tiny villages as a solution need to be equitably distributed throughout all the districts in Fresno, because it seems that District 3 gets the brunt of this. There's land in every single district to at least establish a tiny home village of at least 25 to maybe 30 tiny homes. And what I envision is if you do tiny homes, it could be a part of a solution to the homelessness, because you can, put your residents there, and it can be a community of interest residents. Are they all older than 65 and need medical assistance? And then you have one point where you can provide all those sorts of wraparound services. That's what I'm thinking as far as tiny homes. And it's also a very good use for space and the amount of additional resources besides land and energy. So it actually pencils out to be more economical long term. The moratorium on encampments, it would be better served by the city to actually put out garbage cans, get people toilets, get people showers, get social workers that aren't overworked out there more, and actually have a system of 24/7 services versus this drive-by that they're doing with dealing with the homeless. Because I think once people get some basic humanity back and start to decompress from their experiences on the street, then you will have really good chances of lowering the number and percentage of the homeless. And I see we have 116 seconds left, so I'm gonna, end it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, do you have any additional comments on these additional recommendations?
No, I think everything was, that was good. I like what was said.
Thank you. Brandy, you feel ready to give a recap? Sorry, you're in the middle of walking. I'll let you get adjusted.
As right as I'll ever be. I did take notes. Sorry that I didn't put it on video and I'm moving. I apologize for that. But yeah, I took some notes, so I think I should be able to do so.
Okay.
Unless anyone else wants to.
We'll be here to back you up, Brandy.
That's a hard no, Brandy.
Okay.
No, sorry, Lisa, what was your dog's name again?
Tasha.
Started with Tasha.
Tasha.
Tiffany was in my mind, but I know that wasn't it. Tasha could give us a recap.
We actually have time.
Yeah.
Since we have a moment, just the other things, having an automatic anti-displacement zone would be extremely important when there is development, so that as a element of preventing not creating that stress. If people can people can actually be able to enjoy the development instead of worrying about push outs. So I think that would be a crucial thing for protection. We're going. Bye.
Recording in progress.
When you're joining back from the breakout rooms, please remember to rejoin interpretation. Para todos los que estaban utilizando la función de interpretación, favor de reunirse a la interpretación, ya que se apaga cuando sale uno a los grupos de trabajo.
Thank you, Reina. Luckily, everyone had experience with leaving a breakout room once before, right? You knew what it looked like.
Okay, are we all back then? We're all back. All right. Well, we would now like to hear how your discussion went, what the highlights were, any areas of agreement or disagreement, and any questions that came up. So let's start backwards with, is it group G? Is that our as far back in the alphabet as we go? Okay, let's start with group G. You have a report back for us?
Okay, awesome. I'm Aubrey. I'm going to be reporting for my group. We had a lot of good discussion. Just some highlights of what we discussed. We talked about the homeowner assistance program. One of the concerns that was brought up is that maybe the current homeowner assistance programs aren't marketed wide enough, so that if this policy were to be implemented, market the program to be accessible and to reach more people so that it's taken advantage of. Another highlight when we talked about right to counsel for eviction. Another concern was it could be biased if the city determines who gets an attorney appointed to them. based off what they consider lawful or an unlawful eviction. And a last highlight that my group discussed is when we talked about the expanded room key project. One of the concerns or one of the ideas was to involve people with lived experience to do the outreach and develop a reporting system for why people refuse housing, and ensure that if a person did refuse housing, they are still asked again in the future.
Thank you. How about group F?
That was our group. Brandy, you ready to go? Or is that right, Maricela?
One moment. Let me go ahead and click all the right buttons. Brandy, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay. No one else wanted to be the reporter, so I took notes. So we went over a lot of things. I'll go quickly with the first one with the renter system. It was stated that would be the best way to stabilize housing in Fresno, and the only way to stabilize it, especially in places of utmost crisis. So extreme importance for the city to put this in place as protection and to protect from homelessness. And very important to have a tracking system in this process to make note of those who are where there might be as a pattern. Regarding right to counsel, absolutely. I mean, unanimously, very, very, very important and absolutely needed in the community. The things that were brought up is communications, ensuring that people know about this, that marketing ensures that people are reached with this, that there is the staff that works with them is a paralegal or attorney, so to ensure that they're working with a professional to be able to handle this, that there is cultural competency, and ensure that, like was said before, that there's no biases. With rental registration, it was supported as a way of ensuring that needs would get met sooner, as well as protecting people from being displaced, either from false evictions or from to renovate, but also make sure that there is, as a way of making sure there's no discrimination. Rental deposit help us. We thought it was important to help stabilize the rental market and lessen new homeless. I think there was something else, but I don't remember. Project Room Key, absolutely. I think a huge part of that we emphasize is the housing justice, that it is evaluated to ensure that the needs of the people are being met there, and that that those who are living, that there also be an ongoing system of ensuring that those who are living in these environments in the Project Room Key areas are having a chance to have a voice and express any concerns and get their needs met, as far as any concerns for those living there, and that there is ongoing evaluation for needs that aren't currently being met with, this is a big concern with the current Project Room Key, about there being concerns and people not really having a voice who are living there. Public service lease incentive, another area that is huge. Foster youth, the need for support. We have a lot of youth that do not have that support to prepare to be in housing in the first place, including those who are aging out of the foster care system, those who are leaving unsupportive families. And we need to have that support. It was added that we need to make sure that addresses all backgrounds and needs, and also that is sensitive to the LGBTQ and transgender community, and that there is a thinking through the specific needs that would need to be attended to ensure that their needs are met, and that they are be addressed, as this is extremely important to avoid homelessness with those who are for youth in there. We do have an issue with youth becoming homeless because of lack of support. Right to return. It addresses we'd like to ensure that there is assistance to ensure that those who are returning have the means to be able to do so and address any deterrents to coming back. But absolutely support that. For homeless suites, that this is a huge issue for that. A lot of us knew firsthand, and we know that this is not only a issue of dignity, that if people are in the same place, they can be safer and get the help they need until they get into shelters, but also that homeless suites creates a hindrance to getting housing as people are moved around and have their identification lost, have lose track with caseworkers. And there is a request that if we do that, that there would be instead that there would be services out for those out there, and more 24-hour services than occasional ones to those who are out there to address any needs that are caused by the encampments, including sanitation. And tiny houses that we absolutely ensure that these are spread throughout the community and in places are well resourced, and that they are kept small to they're equitably distributed and limited to small numbers like 25 to 30. I think that's it. There might have been more, but that's enough.
Thank you. That was a comprehensive report. Let's see. How about Group E?
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to report out for Group E, and Sam is going to be my backup in case I miss anything important. So we had Sam, Bob, and Eric in our group, and we had a really great discussion. We didn't talk about all of the policies, but we did spend some time on a number of them. So I'm just going to call out a couple of the highlights. So we first talked about moratorium on encampment sweeps and said that this needed to happen immediately and that there was a lot of harm happening with people being, moved around and losing their possessions and potentially some really important documentation that they might need. And we also kind of connected that with services that could be provided by the city, such as water and bathrooms and vaccination outreach, as well as supporting self-managed safe camps. We also talked about the connection to the need for permanent housing, and that there's a lot of action happening sort of with temporary housing right now, but that permanent housing still needs to be prioritized. We also talked about the tiny house villages, but that there should be a really strong resident control component to that as well. And then I'm going to skip us back a little bit to the assistance programs. So we spent some time on some of the things that ERAP is maybe falling a little bit short on right now. So that more outreach needs to happen for ERAP, perhaps sending out canvassers and revisiting denied applications, that nonprofits are really overburdened right now with sort of the outreach that's placed on them. And that some of the requirements for the programs, such as being able to produce a copy of the lease, are really presenting barriers. And so a lot of these need to be revisited, especially in light of a permanent program that could be supported. So making sure that we're learning from the mistakes that are happening with ERAP and really reimagining a permanent program. This discussion transitioned into a discussion about right to counsel. So even the assistance programs are still kind of in that temporary vein, and it's not necessarily getting at some of the more root issues. And that's something that a right to counsel program that is more of a true right to counsel rather than a eviction, diversion, or mediation program could potentially help solve. Let me go ahead and look through real quick. One of the other things that we touched upon was the right to return home program, and talking about, how our policy development right now really does need to take into account sort of our past sins. And the right to return, we said that everything is in the program design, and that there should be some sort of financial incentive or assistance for families that do want to return back, because moving costs are really expensive and it's a really stressful thing to undertake. So I'll pause there and see if any of my group mates want to add to anything. Going once, going Sam?
I had to unmute and then go back to the Jamboard. Yeah, I think that was a pretty good assessment of it. There's the issue of the anti-displacement zone is kind of, as written, pretty vague. It seems like it's relying on market forces and not letting a certain amount of luxury development happen in a sensitive area. But a lot of these anti-displacement zones also generally in other cities come with really strict penalties if illegal evictions can be proven to have happened, or any sort of history of tenant harassment leading to voluntary people voluntarily leaving the neighborhood. So I think we would like to see there be something more than just you can't saturate the area with luxury housing, but you also have to in those areas really penalize bad behavior more so. Kind of like when you're on the freeway and you're speeding in a construction zone. Speeding's always illegal, but here it's really illegal. So there's some serious consequences for encouraging people to leave. And is there anything else, folks, that we didn't talk about? I'm just going through the Jamboard really quickly.
Yeah, I see Bob wants to add.
Yeah, there's a rapid.
I just wanted to say about the rapid rehousing. I mean, I think we really need to make that term real. Right now, the housing that's being provided in the motels is, in some sense, warehousing those that were homeless in a certain part of the city, as well as creating problems of its own where that's happening. But it's not really housing. As the mayor and HPs and everybody from the city continually say, that's a temporary housing, even though it may be long-term temporary. In the end, those remodeled units are scheduled to be totally remodeled in several years and sold on the market as low-income housing. So we need to look at a housing first approach, which I mentioned in our breakout, which the city did embrace at one point. It was called Start to Home, where first the unhoused are provided housing, and along with that, services if they need them, separate from the housing itself. It really goes a long ways to getting people back on their feet. And where it has been implemented correctly, it's a lot better than the current continuum of care model that the city, county, and the Fresno Housing Authority continuum of care can continue to put a lot of dollars in. And a good portion of these dollars need to be reallocated to doing a housing first approach. And we can talk, there's many discussions to be had about how to build permanent housing. Part of it is tiny home villages, but there are modular homes, there are container homes, there are ways to do this that are cheaper, much more cost effective than traditional housing costs that involve a lot of developers, consultant fees, and a lot of money being siphoned off to promote traditional development programs. We got to get away from that, because so much money is skimmed off or shaved off public dollars. So we need to dig deeper into what is real and what could happen in terms of who builds these houses. They should be city projects. I don't think they should be private developments with HUD incentives. As we know, the city has a really bad track record on building any kind of low-income housing through the HUD funding a very low number of units in the last several years, to say the least, because I have done the research on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that was a lot. Really interesting. How about Group D? I never made it to Group D.
Yeah, so I believe Christian Gonzalez is going to report back for us. Take it away, Christian.
All right, thank you. So yeah, in our group, quickly to respect everyone's time, homeowner renter assistance, my group, we were all for it. One thing to mention and highlight is if the program looks at credit, maybe the city having some type of credit line, especially for our undocumented members, right? To create these pathways for home ownership and renter assistance. Let's see, the right to counsel, we were all for it. And yeah, one of the things we said is like, if housing is already unstable, people aren't going to have access to internet or electronic devices, but for sure someone will have an access to a phone. So having a permanent hotline or number where people can call, whether they're getting any type of like 24-hour notices of eviction, they can call and be assisted. And moving along, the next one was the Here to Stay rental deposit program. Yeah, we all had comments on this and having some aid, even in renting, right? We thought it was preposterous that people have to come up with first, last, and a deposit. And, you know, we know the wages here in Fresno, especially for low income, like people are trying to survive. So having a rental deposit program would be very helpful. Let's see, rental registration program. We agreed for it. Something said, one of our members said it should support and supplement the city's current rental housing inspection act for the rental registration program. Let's see, one of the things that was really important was on the expanded project room key. Wondering what's going to happen because shelters are closing because COVID funds are running out. So this was a particular important one. Another one was the eviction mediation. One of our members thought that'd be good, you know, keeping attorneys out of it and finding a good medium between landlords and the tenant. And the placement burden access destination, one of our members is an older landlord. And so just having help in navigating with that, right? Knowing that as people get older, they're retired or they might be landowners, they're on a fixed income. So having that additional help to improve their properties, making it livable for the tenant as well. Let's see, another good conversation that we had was the public service lease incentive. One of the comments made were if like the tenants, there's good tenants and good landlord relationship, why not extend on that lease? And that flowed into the next conversation of independent youth housing coordinators and having housing for youth specifically. Foster youth were brought up. Already they're aging out of the system and not having that housing stability, so having some pathways as they're transitioning out of foster homes. And let me see. In the last topic we talked about was a return tenant to return home. Like we were all for it, especially if it's described in new development that's happening and people who once lived there are on the top of the list and getting contacted to return home, then we are for it. And then I was commenting on the tiny house villages and saying that I was in favor of it. Fresno Metro Ministry has another program, and there's a big garden in Southwest Fresno called Yosemite Village, which is owned by the housing authority land, but we are exploring different housings, like Mr. Robert McCluskey was saying, right? Not just the traditional apartments or single homes, but container homes, and just having dignified other alternatives to housing. And yeah, I think that's it, Sean, unless I missed anything or anyone else from the group.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Okay, I think that brings us to Group C. And we're at 7:30 right now, so we'll try to wrap it up. After we hear from you all, we have a quick poll that we want to do, and then we'll be done. So
Okay, great.
Group C.
Yeah, for Group C, we have Jacob Bailey, who's going to report back. Thank you, Jacob.
Hey, we bounced around a little bit, and so we didn't hit all of them, but we have the homeowner renter assistance programs. The current one is basically a failed venture, and that needs to be fixed. Basically. And the rental assistance program may be less effective in the long term than something like eviction right to counsel, if done properly. It needs to be something that is universal, not decided by a clerk. If we're going to give them a right to counsel, it should be a right to counsel, not a here you go, if we feel like it. The rental deposit program, lots of us like this one. I personally have literally never gotten a deposit back from a landlord, and none of my friends have either. I did a poll talking about it the other day. But one of our people said that we need to make sure that there's some sort of clarity on what regular wear and tear means, so that landlords don't just take that anyways, using the city as a pass-through. Rental registration, only as good as the city's enforcement, and the city hasn't been enforcing it well enough. But the portal kind of seems like a great way to get that accountability that's needed, so that we can see where and when those code violations are happening. And if we don't see something happening in terms of the city acting on it, we as citizens can do some work to make sure that gets done. We skipped the additional stuff because we wanted to move to the next thing. We looked at dignified housing and legacy considerations, encampment sweeps, and dignified housing and scatter site should be the priorities, not the additional. They just should. Public lease incentive, cool, 3 years. I'm a public housing person, wonderful. Why do I get a 3-year lease, but the people I'm working with are still stuck month to month? I don't know. Seems like a silly thing to make the first priority. Then later we have dignified tiny housing and scatter site housing. It's important, it's big. We spend a lot of time talking about the pros and cons of encampment sweeps, with some of us thinking that it's important that things are kept safe and clean and highways are kept safe, and the other one saying, man, this is really a painful thing that happens. It takes away resources of people who are struggling. It makes it harder to get out of homelessness. And saying that, well, I mean, this dignified housing thing is a way around that. We need to end those sweeps. Maybe we can clean up the streets by giving them places to stay instead of, wiping out all of their worldly possessions in one big sweep. And that was most of what we talked about. If anybody wants to chime in and cover things that I missed, that'd be great.
Thanks, Jacob. All right, that brings us to Group B.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Our group was great. Our group consisted of both Dallas and Pedro. We were really in favor of all these recommendations, but we leaned on a higher priority of 2 of them. The first one was the homeowner and rental assistance. The second was the eviction right to counsel. And for the first one, for homeowners rental assistance program, we really were hoping we could use this program to increase class equity and to assist people that, couldn't afford to get into certain neighborhoods. So they would have that opportunity to do so. For eviction right to counsel, we really wanted to extend that to all evictions and make that a little bit broader. We wanted to extend it to small businesses. We had even suggested penalizing landlords that illegally evict. And we also wanted to start identifying some repeat offenders. So, you know, if you had a problem once, but if you start seeing, you know, certain landlords be repetitive in their problems, maybe code enforcement could go after those people. For rental registration, we figured that the code department currently really is not running as efficiently as it could, that it should get possibly a complete makeover and resources. For the independent youth coordination recommendation, we really liked that one. We believe that it would keep some of our college kids in Fresno and keep our talent pool here. We also, just as Christina's group had mentioned, we talked a lot about foster kids and ensuring that they have a stable place, housing over their head. So those are some of our highlights. Am I missing things? Is anybody, Dallas, Pedro, do you guys want to add anything to that? It's quiet.
Sounds like a good summary. Thanks, Lachey. And Dallas and Pedro. All right, that brings us to Group A.
All right. So we discussed, or had a lot of the same ideas as what was previously discussed. However, I would say the major theme that came out within our discussion is, who do these policies protect? Who would they, who would they be written for? And the goal would be hopefully everyone who lives in the city of Fresno, especially those who may not be citizens. We have people who aren't citizens, but yet they work like citizens do. They own small businesses like citizens do. They pay taxes like citizens do. They work in the fields and on 100-degree days, long hours. So it's only fair that these policies should also apply to, people who aren't citizens. We're all part of this community. We all give, and we need some help. And definitely, a lot of these policies, all of these policies, should apply to all of our residents, no matter their status. But we do agree with all the comments previously made. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. Wow, that was really, really interesting. Thank you all for your participation. And I think to cap it off, we do a quick poll or two just to see where you're standing right now. What are your priorities that have risen to the surface? And of course, although we're doing this here, what we also really encourage you to do is to fill out the Here to Stay survey that's on the Here to Stay website when you feel like you've studied the report enough. But for now, Maricela, can you take us give us those survey questions?
Really quickly, before we dive into the poll, I know that one of Stephen's group members had spoken to the need for small businesses to be included in the conversation as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and quickly drop that contact information that you spoke to earlier, Sophia, in the chat, and posting it in both English and Spanish. And then with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Drew to go ahead and launch that poll.
Awesome. So launching the poll here, which policy do you think would be most helpful to your community? You can select up to 3. So you're allowed to choose. It's a multiple choice survey. So which direct service as an alternative to eviction policy would be most helpful to your community? So you have them all listed there. The ones listed in the report as primary programs and additional recommendations, as well as for which dignified housing and legacy consideration policy would be most helpful to your community. Again, you get up to 3, so it's not just a 1.
Also, just a quick little note, the second question regarding the remaining policies are down below, so you just have to scroll just a little bit to select that for the second part of the poll.
I really enjoyed the discussion this evening. Felt like a lot of people had general agreement on a lot of them, and the need, which I think I heard from a couple folks, to have further conversation about how they work. That's what I love about these conversations, these study sessions, is we get to bounce ideas off each other and hear what other people think and give you a good perspective on things you maybe didn't consider and get a better understanding of what some of the intent was maybe behind some of the policies, and maybe who even came up with the potential recommendation for a program that's listed in the Here to Stay document.
Really quickly, I do see a comment in the chat. If the poll is in Spanish, the poll is not available in Spanish. However, feel free to go ahead and post your vote in the chat. That goes for anyone that's having a hard time navigating the poll, all the scrolling, all the buttons that are on your screen. You can also go ahead and type it in the chat so that we can record your votes that way.
Thank you. All right, we got a good amount of votes coming in now. Just give it a couple more, maybe a minute or so. Does that sound good?
Marisela, would you mind giving some time so that our Spanish interpreter could read through the poll questions? And
yes, did you want me to go ahead and read through them so that they're able to interpret, since Zoom doesn't allow us to have multiple languages on the poll?
That would be great.
Perfect. Alrighty, so for the first poll question, it says which direct services and alternatives to eviction policy would be most helpful to your community? And then the options are Here to Stay, Homeowner and Renter Assistance Program, Eviction Right to Counsel, Here to Stay Rental Deposit Program, and I'll read through the additional recommendation options. It's the Displacement Burden Access Designation, Expanded Project Room Key, Incentivized Eviction Mediation, and then the Rapid Rehousing Dispatch. So that's the first question. And again, to go ahead and record your votes, you can go ahead and type in the chat. If you want to go ahead and number which ones you want to vote for, that also works. And then the second question is, which dignified housing and legacy considerations policy would be most helpful to your community? Public service lease incentive, independent youth housing coordinator, right to return home. The additional recommendation is tenant buyout regulation, automatic anti-displacement zone, dignified tiny house villages and scattered site housing, moratorium on encampment sweeps, kinship housing permissions, and then informed livability. And Drew, I'll go ahead and hand it back to you. Estela, if you want to go ahead and put your vote in the chat, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you can also go ahead and communicate to the Spanish interpreter or raise your hand so that you can go ahead and communicate your vote orally if you'd like, if you feel comfortable with that as well.
Thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, I say we give it maybe just under a minute before we close the poll. Any of our facilitators learn anything interesting tonight? We did have a dog. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I learned many things, being able to drop into the different groups. I met someone who has been displaced from Chinatown, so that was really interesting.
Si gusta, Estela, puede hacer un comentario a voz alta y están aquí para asistirle. Mrs. Estela, she can feel welcome to comment out loud, and the group is here to listen.
Do we need to unmute Estela?
Estela was able to unmute themselves, but I'm not sure they muted themselves again. So I'll go ahead and ask to unmute one more time in case they'd like to provide their votes verbally, since I'm seeing that they're having issues accessing the poll.
I see that there's a request for the polling to be in Spanish. Is that something we might be able to provide next time, Maricela?
Zoom does not allow that capability. There's a character limit on the polls. So something that we can do is we can go ahead and search for a different sort of format for us to do the poll. I know that, for example, the Transform Fresno website has the Here to Stay poll in multiple languages. Correct, Sophia?
It's a survey, yes.
Survey. Okay, then we can go ahead and maybe explore that option. So I see Reina has something to say. So Reina, go ahead and unmute yourself.
It does look like Estela is trying to unmute herself or ask a question, but she's not been able to.
I enabled the ability for Estela to unmute. So Estela, if you're on the app, you can go ahead and just hit the unmute button, which is in the shape of a microphone. Otherwise, you can go ahead and hit *9. And then we'll try to activate it that way. But at the moment, everyone has the capability to unmute themselves. So Estela, you should be able to go ahead and try. Alrighty, I'm not seeing Estela unmute. So Estela, I will go ahead and provide my email in the chat, and then I'll go ahead and have the poll translated to, if you email me, I'll go ahead and reply with the translated poll so that you can record your votes. That goes for Clara as well. You can go ahead and feel free to communicate with me. I'll send my email and my office number in the chat. And then Drew, if you want to end the poll and share those results, you should be able to.
Deal. Poll has ended. Sharing results. Can everybody see it? We have a clear winner for number 1 with eviction right to council. And then coming in second and third place of the dead heat, we have the additional recommendation of dignified tiny house villages and the additional recommendation on the moratorium on encampment sweeps. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, thank you. And apologies to the Spanish speakers. We'll try to come up with a better alternative for that. Okay, so let me remind us of the schedule again. I'm sorry, I have a train in the background chugging away. Our final meeting will be Thursday, a week from today, 5:30. And the subject matter will be that was scheduled for July 29th. So it will be guidance for socially responsible development and improving transparency and accountability. So if you would like to participate in that, just go to the Transform Fresno website and register. And I think my PowerPoint, there we go. That's the presenter's view. And if you have questions, you can always contact me. And here's the Transform Fresno website for all the resources. So with that, we thank you for your patience and your participation tonight. Really appreciate it. Any last questions before we wrap? Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate
Thank you.
your time.